naming the notes just because they're on a line or a space is not relevant. We sight read music as a note that's in relation to the note that came before it. If there's no first note, then we kind of do need to locate that first note, but we can do it through the use of just a couple of landmark notes. So just overall, mnemonics are confusing because students get hung up on trying to remember 4 formulas when all they need to do is remember one note in the treble, one note in the bass, and work it out from there.
Welcome to the Piano Sensei Way. I am your host, Clinton Pratt, and I am here to help you master the art of running a successful piano teaching studio. I'm super excited to have Samantha Coates with us. I first saw her / met her, I think at NCKP 2017 when she did this workshop on mnemonics, and it was absolutely brilliant. The room was packed. We were laughing, crying in a good way, having a great time, just realizing all these light bulbs going off. Anyway, I'm super excited to have her on. I'll just bring her on now. And Samantha, tell us, well, I already told everybody your name, but you can say your name and tell us where you live.
Thanks, Clinton. Thanks for having me on. I live in Sydney, Australia, so quite far away.
Yes. In fact, right now it's Monday evening for me and Tuesday morning for you.
That's correct. I am in the future. If you would like to know what today's wordle is, I can tell you.
Yeah, and actually it explains a lot. You're so innovative. It's because you're literally in the future from me. So amazing. Well, I'm so excited to see you. And actually, we just saw each other a few days ago at the MTNA conference.
Yes, that was great fun.
And that session was amazing too. You talked about the transfer student, and maybe we could do another episode on that, because when I saw that, I thought that's amazing too, and so many helpful tips, and I was taking screenshots of the slides and all kinds of things.
Thank you. I'm so glad you found it helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, so the topic is mnemonics, and so let's just jump right in. What is that, and what do you think about it?
All right. So mnemonics in relation to music, yes, as everybody knows. I mean, mnemonic really just means memory aid. But in terms of music, it's having a memory aid to remember the names of the notes and positions of the notes on the staff. So everyone's familiar with, every good boy deserves fruit or fudge or whatever you like to say. There are so many different things for this. Probably FACE in the treble is the universally most used. I don't think there's another one. And then in the bass, people have a variety of things. Good boy deserve fruit always, whatever. Green buses drive fast always. Great big dreams for Australia. There's so many. I want to say at the outset, I think I used to teach using these. It's been a long time since I've done it, but I'm pretty sure I used to. And a lot of teachers do. But I have gradually come to realize that it doesn't work. It actually slows down the process of sight reading.
Interesting. Yes. How about good burritos don't fall apart?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. There's so many. And I think sometimes, speaking of transfer students, I've had transfer students, and they're so excited that they can tell me that they came up with that one, or their band teacher at school came up with, oh, good burritos don't fall apart. And so they're so excited and they think it's clever and all this, but
that's right.
Yeah, I don't think it really helps. And my experience is students who rely on that, they, go through all these extra steps and, okay, let's play this. And then good burritos okay, that's a D, but then they play the wrong D on the piano, right?
That's right.
And so they don't really have an idea of what's this actually supposed to sound like.
That's right. That's the whole thing. It is the thing about mnemonics. Let's say, for example, if only treble clef existed, and we just said to students, okay, so the notes in the spaces are FACE. It happens to spell out face. I think that's a good one, because that's just learning 4 landmark notes. You really don't need those 4, because if you understand how reading works, it's just you can see that notes are going up by, skipping up. You probably only need the 1 F. But I think there's nothing really wrong with FACE. The problem comes in when you're also trying to do a mnemonic for the lines in the treble, and then you're also trying to do one for the bass lines and the bass spaces. So now you effectively are trying to teach 18 landmark notes, and it doesn't work. It's not necessary. And there have been, I don't know if you've just found this, Clinton, but this is what I have found when I have inherited students who know, let's say they know these 4 formulas off by heart, and let's say they're really good at naming the notes. Sometimes it's a revelation to them that the names of the notes are based on the first 7 letters of the alphabet. It's never occurred to them that when you go put them in order, it's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, because they've just been taught these convoluted sentences that put the notes out of order. I think that's what gets my goat the most. It's deliberately putting the notes out of order when there's this beautiful order that exists already.
Right. And why are we doing it in skips? I guess because that's the lines or the spaces. And I guess that could be helpful for spelling chords. You skip, C, E, G. But still, yeah, I know what you mean. It's just A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
Yes. Yes. And we don't even need some. I have even heard of some teachers who've come up with a mnemonic for remembering A, B, C, D, E, F, G. We really don't need that. That is the alphabet.
Right.
And so I think reading notes on lines and spaces is very, very helpful when we're sight reading and we're trying to read in patterns. But naming the notes just because they're on a line or a space is not relevant. We sight read music as a note that's in relation to the note that came before it. If there's no first note, then we kind of do need to locate that first note, but we can do it through the use of just a couple of landmark notes. So just overall, mnemonics are confusing because students get hung up on trying to remember 4 formulas when all they need to do is remember 1 note in the treble, 1 note in the bass, and work it out from there based on this pre-existing beautiful order.
Right. And I wish I could remember if I tried to learn mnemonics. I don't really remember because I started playing so young, and I think my older sister used the John Thompson method, and so she kind of used that with me. And I remember the first piece just being several middle C's, and then after that C, D, C, D. And so that is more of like a landmark approach, as long as you know C, and then you just go up from there or down from there.
Exactly.
And then, yeah, I don't remember trying to do all the lines and spaces. Although there obviously was a point where I could name any of the letters on any of the lines or spaces. But as far as reading meaning playing music, I don't think about letters, right?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. We don't name notes before we play them. We don't think about the letter names before we play them. So my big beef about mnemonics is that it places too much importance on the name of the note. It actually does not matter what the name of the note is. What matters is, can you play it? And can you play it in the correct area? So before, when you told the story of someone who's trying to work out, great big dreams, whatever, it's a D, and then they play the wrong D. That is very common. So there are some students who are just brilliant at remembering these 4 formulas, and they can proudly name any note. But that doesn't mean that they can play it on an instrument. And that doesn't mean that they're a good sight reader. So I try to explain to parents now, it's a bit like, children learn the alphabet before they go to school usually, but that doesn't mean they can read. And they can probably tell you the name of any letter they see, but that doesn't mean they can read. It's different when you're reading words. You're putting sounds together and you're chunking up patterns.
Right. I had an adult student recently who was writing the letter names in all of the notes. And, I asked her why, and she's like, well, I'm trying to, memorize them all. And yeah, I said what you said, well, it doesn't really matter if we call it A or whatever, like just play it. And it took her a while to get that. She's like, wait, what? And once I, explained like you did, it's an extra step to name the letter and then find that on the piano if you can just see it and play it.
Yes.
Sometimes I'll even ask a question to a student like, play this note or play the first note, but they think I'm asking them what's the letter. And so they'll say B.
Yeah.
And then I look at them for a second, play this on the piano.
Yes.
Right? And like they're trying to name it, right? And once they realize, actually, I don't really care what the name is, just treble G. Of course, that's the name, but I'm just saying that so we all know what we're talking about. But if you point to it, then they can play it. Right?
Yes.
Who cares
exactly.
what they call it?
Exactly. And just what you said then of you're just saying G because just to refer to it so we know what to call it. That is the whole point. The letters only have names so that we can have a naming convention so that we can easily refer to things. We can speak to each other about notes. But there are different naming conventions. There's solfege, there's Indian solfege, there's not everybody calls notes the same thing. So knowing the name of the note is useless if you're speaking to somebody who's going to call that something else. But it's all the same language if we play it. Play that symbol. That symbol is supposed to translate to sound. So
right, yeah. And that's the whole point of having the written notation, right? Is that it doesn't matter what language or what letters you use, or is that you can recreate that same sound.
That's exactly it. And a really good way to get that across to, particularly to adult students who have written every note name in the book, is I explain to them, typically, pretty much universally, any musician who is reading music and playing music is not internalizing names of the notes as we do that because there's no time for that. Just like when you're reading a book, so we might turn to the front if they've come to me and they're in the middle of a method book. Well, let's say I turn to the front cover where it says the words method book. And I say, okay, so read those words for me. And they just say method book. And then I say, okay, so you did not say METHOD method, BOOK book. You just said the words. You didn't say what the letters were that made up those words. You just said the words. And imagine how time consuming and laborious would be if we articulated the name of every letter before we said the word, the sound that the combination makes. And they kind of get that point that it's time consuming and useless. And it's not. It's just notation, as you say. It's just this symbol that represents a sound. It really doesn't matter what the note's called.
Right, exactly. Do you want to connect with other teachers in person? Do you want to learn new teaching strategies and explore outside-the-box approaches? Join us at the Creative Teaching Conference, a radical retreat to recharge and reinvigorate your teaching. This unique conference was started by me and my two friends and colleagues, Christopher Oil and Tony Parlapiano, back in the summer of 2022. All three of us had so many ideas we wanted to share, but instead of trying to get selected for an MTNA or NCKP conference, we created our own event. We each present a few workshops, but we also have guest presenters as well. Topics include improvisation, composition, student-led learning. You'll experience inspiring workshops on creative teaching strategies and creative performance ideas. Learn about different ways to structure lessons, such as online groups, memberships, and subscription models. We eat meals together and plan social time so you can connect with teachers from all over the country, forming new musical friendships that will last a lifetime. Mark your calendars for July 7 to 9, 2024 in Cincinnati, Ohio. Check out creativeteachingconference.com for more info. Yeah, so back to the mnemonic devices or whatever.
Yes.
So how have these mnemonic devices become so popular?
It's a good question. I think that when I think about my early days of teaching, I just taught the way I was taught. I didn't have a lot of professional development. I didn't have any mentoring. And there are so many posters in schools, posters that are trying to be helpful, like in school classrooms, that are showing these mnemonic devices. I think it's widespread. I think a lot of people use them, and therefore that perpetuates itself. But whenever I've given my presentation on mnemonics, it changes people's minds and drives the point home. And I think that people have really sat down and thought about, is this really helping my student to actually sight read music? Has realized, well, no, it doesn't really. But it's widespread usage, and people, there seems to be a measure of success sometimes if students do click onto it, or if they think it's fun to make up their own devices. There's that level of engagement from a student that the teacher is appreciating, but I still don't think that the end goal is that they read music any better.
Right. It's more just the tradition. That's what we do.
Yes.
Or that's what I do in music class at school, so we can name the letters, or maybe like flashcards so you can name them. When I do flashcards, I pull up the written notation of a note on treble clef or bass clef, and then they have to play it on the piano.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what a flashcard should be. What is the point of saying the name of the note? That's not a skill.
Right. So, yeah, and I try to put myself in a 7-year-old student's shoes, or get in their brain. Like, what? I wonder what it would be like to try to memorize these mnemonics, and is it going to help me read or whatever? And so that's why when you do that presentation where you play that game, it sort of resets us to like an ignorant place, right? Where we don't know what's going on, and then we have to figure it out.
Yes. It obviously works best in a room with a whole bunch of piano teachers.
Mm-hmm.
I came up with this game because I was trying to convince the parents of my students that it doesn't work. So I had stopped teaching with mnemonics, but the parents were thwarting me. The students would go home and they'd come back the next week going, my mum and dad showed me a trick. Every good boy deserves fruit. And the parent thinks they're helping, but they're not. So I sort of came up with this game where if I change the names of the notes and then totally and purposely make up 4 different mnemonics that they're not used to at all, because their child would not be used to even the ones that we're familiar with, completely bombard them with this new information and then try to test them on naming notes, how would they do? And I've run this experiment many, many, many times. So, and when we are bombarded with mnemonics, very difficult to name notes. When we understand the order of the notes, we just count up from a single landmark note, easy peasy. Not that the end goal, as we said before, is to name the note. The end goal is to play the note anyway, but it still does show that we can dispense with mnemonics.
Right. Yeah, and that's what I experienced at your workshop at the National Conference for Keyboard Pedagogy, and I think it was 2017.
Yeah, it was.
But, okay, great. Can we show the audience what you're talking about? Just a little teaser?
Yes. Okay. And I'll try to describe it for people who aren't watching. So, okay. So basically I'm just going to show you 4 different mnemonics. Okay. So pretend, if you didn't know how to read music, just pretend that this is what you would see.
To everybody who's listening on podcast platform, just remember we have the video version on YouTube, which is the Piano Sensei Way.
Okay, so here we have, I'm going to bombard you with 4 mnemonics. So we have the treble lines, JLNIK. We've changed the names of the notes. So the way we're going to remember that is Joey's live nestled in kangaroos. I'm just going to whiz through these. Then KMHJ, and the way we're going to remember that is kangaroos make high jumps. And so I'm doing this with teachers, and I make them repeating back in the room, and then we repeat those, and I say, great, have you got all that? Fantastic. Okay, on to bass clef. So now we have LNIKM. By now everyone's giggling. And the way we're going to remember the bass clef lines is we're going to remember this sentence. Last night I kissed Michael. And then here are the bass clef spaces. And the way we're going to remember this is Michael has just left. So now you have these 4 mnemonics. We have the bass clef spaces. Michael has just left. We have the bass clef lines. Last night I kissed Michael. No one can remember these, right? We have treble spaces. Kangaroos make high jumps, and the treble lines. Joey's live nestled in kangaroos. So then okay, so I'm just going to, that sort of gives you an idea. So I'll just stop sharing for a moment. The point here is to deliberately confuse everybody. And everybody is confused. And then I show some single flashcards to teachers in the audience, and they have no idea what the name of the note is. They can't do it.
Right. For example, let's just think of one. So like third line or something. Yeah. And I'll try
the third line in the bass clef. What's that
note? Kangaroo. Last night I.
Oh, you did that very well.
Okay.
Well done. Okay, what about the second space in the treble?
Oh, Joey's, I don't know. Yeah, something about kangaroos.
Lines. Yeah, it's tricky. We've got to. That's what happens to our students. Rather than just thinking about where that is in relation to a note they already know and working that out, they're running through these formulas in their head, which is so time consuming. And they often then say the wrong formula, or they get the formula itself mixed up. So they start saying things like, I don't know, great big dreams for fruit, or all boys eat grass, or something like that. It's right. They get, there's just no point to it. So then after we've had a minute or so of everyone's trying to name notes and can't get it right, then I show them the notes in order. And I just show them all this is, I've changed the names of the notes. I'm just using the next 7 letters of the alphabet. I'm just using HIJKLMN, and that is all. That's all I did. So I show them then that it's basically C is H. And then we play the game again, and I ask people what the name of the note is, and they're just counting up from H all the time. And they're just remembering where H lives. That's the whole point. Remember where one note lives. Know where that note lives on the piano, and then work it out from there.
Right. It's brilliant. Yes.
It's simple.
I think that, it's simple but brilliant, and that does really help. Like you said, to convince parents, they've already got the phrases memorized, so they think it's easy and they're just helping their child. But to do it like this is to go into the mind of somebody who doesn't know, and then it's just confusing and frustrating.
Yeah, it is. And what a shame to not use this beautiful order that they learned when they were 0, probably. They've been hearing it their whole lives, the alphabet. So why would you not harness the power of that?
Yeah. And we talked about this a little bit already, but can you explain more what the better way is? We said landmarks and just relationships of notes.
Yes. Relationships of notes. So understanding, being able to read a pattern. So there's two things about being able to read music, being musically literate. One is knowing when you see a symbol on a page, knowing where that relates to on your instrument. So when the adults do go and write in a phrase like dun 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 dun, they're going to write in G G G D E E D, and we can say, well, there are 7 G's on the piano, so which one is it? And are they all the same G's? And then the adults will say, well, yes, they're all the same G's. Okay, so why did we need to write? We don't need to write G 3 times. You can see that there's 3 repeated notes there, so you wouldn't need to write that in. And if you if you saw it stepping up or stepping down, you wouldn't need to write that in either. You would just follow that pattern. And if you saw it skipping up or skipping down, you wouldn't need to write that in either, because you just follow that pattern. So you can dispense with writing all letter names in, because once you know your starting point, you're just going to follow patterns. Now, if there is a leap, that's where you're going to use your landmark knowledge again. So the first thing is to have some sort of way of remembering where a starting point is, and then to follow a pattern. It's the only way to sight read with any fluency. We cannot be stopping and figuring out the name of each note and then playing it. So now, what was the question? Why is it better to not use them? Yeah, because we sight read music as patterns. We sight read in chunks. We haven't got time to be trying to see what the names are, and we need to recognize that when it goes line space line space line space, that is stepping. And the piano is such a wonderful instrument for that. It's the only instrument where that pattern on the page directly relates to a visual and kinesthetic pattern on the keyboard, on the instrument. Everything else, there's sets of fingering that you would have to use, but it doesn't relate to a visual pattern. And that, when you see notes that are all on lines, that's skipping on the piano. That's skipping notes. Or notes that are all in spaces, that's skipping. So that's where it's valuable to learn to see whether notes are on lines or in spaces. I think that's important.
Right. Yes, exactly. Skip, skip, or skip, skip, skip. I'm always telling my students, like a 7th chord is 4 notes. So it's just skip, skip, skip.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's great. Piano is great from that point of view for sight reading.
Are you familiar with Celebrate Piano, the method book?
I don't think I am.
I encountered it when I first started teaching, and I love the approach, because before there's even clefs, it basically tells you where to play the first note on the piano.
Oh, that sounds great. And then you're following it.
Yeah, then that transitions into, I think there's not even lines and spaces yet. Then once there are lines and spaces, it still tells you where to start. And it does happen to be the same place as if it was treble clef. There's just no clef there, so it might be the third space. And so it's a C, and then eventually it starts having a G on the G line, showing you where it is on the piano. And then eventually it's the treble clef symbol. And I love that. And I started noticing in my students, because I had transfer students and I had new students, and I was kind of thrown into this, and students were using different methods, or I would just start with them with one. And I noticed all of them that were in that one were much better at reading. So then I realized, okay, I just need to make sure I'm stressing that no matter what method they're using. Right?
Yes.
And what do you use? Is there a specific method or materials that you use that help that approach? And don't talk about the mnemonics.
I like using these little pink flashcards. I think they might have come from an Alfred set. I don't use any methods at all, but I have this set of cards that have no clef on them. They're just, it's just 5 lines with notes that are either stepping or skipping. There might be 2, 3, or 4 notes on them. And I use them a lot. And so I will show the student a pattern. It might show 4 notes stepping up. If there was a clef there, then we would know it started on, let's say it starts on the 3rd line and steps up. If there was a clef there, then, we might expect them to start playing on a B if it was treble clef. But actually there's no clef. So I just say, pick any note on the piano and play this pattern. Just start anywhere. The point is to recognize the pattern and what is happening. later on, and then separately to that, we can have a random note reading exercise. I really love the games like Note Rush, Staff Wars, Flash Note Derby, where you can practice. It's basically a flashcard game where you can get used to responding to single notes. So if we can respond to single notes quickly, and then we can recognize patterns, well, that is all you need to sight read.
Yeah, and I think surely most piano teachers know and realize that that's the way to do it. I mean, you don't play a Bach 3-part fugue or a Schubert impromptu and name all the letters or think all of the letters, right? Everybody,
Correct.
teachers would agree,
Yes.
there's no way I would say, okay, sight read this Bach piece and name all the notes as you go. Like,
Yes.
oh, that's crazy. No, I can just play it. And it's like, well, that's magic. How do you do that?
Yeah.
How do you just see what's on the page and you just make the sound? I mean, that's amazing. Yeah. Right.
Yes.
And so I wish more teachers would realize, oh yeah, that's how I do it. That's how beginners should do it too. It's not that we make them learn some other way and then eventually they'll be magic sight readers.
Yes, that is right. So it's more, I guess, whenever I talk about it, I'm saying that it's not that mnemonics are so evil or anything in themselves. They're just an unnecessary step. It is just not, we don't need to take that detour of naming a note. We're just going to see it, we're going to play it. And sure, we do need to know what the nomenclature is so that we can refer to things to each other. We can call, when the conductor says, go from the B in bar 2, well, we're going to need to know what the conductor's talking about. But you're right, we're not going to be, it's not part of the playing process.
Exactly. Yes. And I think it's similar with rhythm. I actually just recorded another episode on rhythm and some of the same issues came up with as far as, the rhythm, like what do we call it? A quarter note or a quaver, or are we counting 1 and 2 and all this stuff? Whereas just look at the pattern and play it. There's four steady beats, or these are twice as fast and then those are longer. Right?
Yes.
Like who cares what they're called? Who cares the counting? All of that.
Yes. That's right. In fact, literally this morning, I had a parent email me. They're dissatisfied with their teacher, wanting to change teachers, so potential transfer student. And they said that they were disheartened that their son had been playing for 2 years and he was 7 years old. And she asked him, she pointed to a crotchet, so a quarter note on the page, and said, how many beats is this? And he couldn't tell her. And she just thought that was very poor after 2 years. And I wrote back and I said, well, it just depends on the context of that, because I know many students who are able to say, oh, yes, that's a crotchet, that's a quarter note, that's an eighth note, that's worth this, that's worth that. But their actual rhythm reading is poor. You put a 4-bar rhythm in front of them, they can't clap it to you. It's useless if they can say the names of the notes in there. They need to be able to clap the rhythm and translate it to sound. And so that is exactly the point of not bothering to name notes.
One final question, maybe, as we get close to wrapping up. With transfer students who are used to the mnemonics and all of that, how long does it take, or how do you think that goes with them sort of switching their mindset into just more of a landmark approach?
That's a good question. For me, when I've inherited students who seem to be a bit hung up on, every good boy deserves fruit, I simply give them lots of patterned flashcard reading to do. Just what does this sound like? What does this sound like? Just getting them to respond very quickly so they haven't got time. Or I'll say, I'm going to give you a whole lot of things to play. Every single one of these flashcards is going to start on G. So they've got their starting note. They know that. And now just follow the pattern. And I just get them to do that. And I'm constantly asking them to play things and never name things. And soon they do stop using the mnemonics because they haven't got time. And after a while, you do start to remember. If you see a symbol often enough and you play in the correct position often enough, you start to internalize that's where it all happens, and you just don't need mnemonics anymore.
Brilliant. And I may, if I have your permission, I may play your little game with my teachers. So at my studio, there's a handful of other teachers who teach at my studio. It's a multi-teacher studio. And we have team meetings every now and then. And we have one coming up, and I may want to play that game if I give you credit. Can I do that?
Sure. It does take quite a bit of setting up, I will warn you, because when you are showing the flashcards, like when I'm showing the flash, it's hard for me to remember the mnemonics. Mm-hmm. And the whole point of cueing in the game is that when somebody is getting confused and says the wrong letter, then I have to know which was the wrong mnemonic they were using. And so I have to remember them. Right. There is a video on YouTube of me playing this game with teachers, like the whole game, it's like a 15-minute demonstration. So
yes. So actually, if that's okay, I will post that link for our audience to watch that, because I think it's very helpful.
Cool. Yeah, that would be good. There's a blog post and there's a YouTube video, but on the video, it does. I am in the room with a bunch of teachers, and it's the full thing, and it gets the point across, and it's quite fun. I think it's called Samantha Coates Explains Why Mnemonics Do Not Work, or something like that.
Yes. Yeah, we'll be sure to share those. And Samantha, I just want to tell you, I really, really appreciate you coming on. You're amazing and have so many great ideas, and you're fun. And I know whenever I see your name on the program at a conference, I'm going to your session, no matter what it is. So you can talk about cheese or whatever it is. I'm coming. Okay.
That is so kind. Thank you. I really appreciate you saying that, Clinton. That's really lovely.
Yeah. So if you have any final thoughts, or if you want to plug, a website or anything, now is the time.
Well, the blog post about mnemonics that I do, it's called Every Good Boy Deserves ... Forgetting. And that's on BlitzBooks.com. So that's BLITZ, BlitzBooks.com. And there are my musings about a whole lot of things on my blog.
Yes, great. Thank you. And just to tell the audience, she's got great materials on there as well, pieces and resources and all sorts of things. All right. Well, this has been really helpful. Maybe you'll come back again and we can do another topic, because you have so many great ideas. But thanks again, Samantha.
Thank you, Clinton. That was really fun.
All right. Take care, everybody.